Live from Tampa Bay streaming news leader, this is ABC Action News, taking action for you.
Right now at 5, tracking Laura, what was a powerful Category 4 hurricane pummeled the Louisiana and Texas coast, and now the tropical storm is not over yet. The latest, plus the help from Florida that is now on the way. And finally free, a man who served 37 years behind bars begins a new life today after being found innocent. Our cameras are there as he walks free from prison. And an overdose spike, how the pandemic is playing a role in drug use and the rehab organization that's trying to stop it. But first, a breaking news. Hillsborough County calling for an emergency school board meeting first thing tomorrow morning. This after a judge vacated the automatic stay that was requiring school districts to offer an in-person learning option. It's still unclear what exactly will be discussed, but Hillsborough County has been in a back and forth battle with the state, originally wanting to wait a month before students go back to the classroom. We are reaching out right now to get you some clarification here. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Jamison Euler.
And I'm Lauren St. Germain in for Wendy tonight. Laura is now a tropical storm. It's moving north and east, and it made landfall as a dangerous Cat 4 hurricane last night. Listen to the wind. Wow, that storm hit in the middle of the night, and as the sun came up, we're starting to actually see some of the damage. Streets flooded, power lines just toppled, and trucks tossed like toys. Over 500,000 people in Texas and Louisiana were forced to evacuate as Laura strengthened in the Gulf.
We had, I know, well over 5,000, maybe as many as 10,000 people who evacuated, and especially for those in the Port Arthur and Orange and Beaumont areas, it could have been a lifesaver.
Earlier yesterday, the National Hurricane Center warned that the potential 20-foot storm surge would be unsurvivable. We know at least 2 people have died in separate incidents, a 14-year-old girl and a 68-year-old man. They were both killed when trees fell on their homes.
Communities in that region are littered with storm damage right now, and they're also dealing with a chemical plant fire in Charles City. Large plumes of smoke could be seen rising into the sky. The governor urged residents there to take shelter, turn off their air conditioning units, and wait for further instructions. It's still not clear what exactly is burning right now or if this was a result of the storm.
So let's get the latest on where Laura is now. Chief Meteorologist Dennis Phillips is here. And Dennis, this storm isn't over yet.
It isn't, but certainly the worst is over, Lauren, and that is a good thing. You know, you look back at the Louisiana area, wind was the biggest issue. There was a lot of talk. The Hurricane Center used that word that I know it caught a lot of people's attention. It did mine as well, unsurvivable. And yet the storm surge, what did move in was in a very remote part of Louisiana. Cameron County has like 7,000 people in it. So while it was nowhere near the forecast high, fortunately, it went into an area that was pretty remote. The winds, not so much. I'm getting a lot of reports from folks in Lake Charles where they have seen a lot of damage due primarily to wind. It was a fast-moving system. We knew there wouldn't be a lot of flooding in terms of the rainfall, although still 4 to 6 inches of rain likely, and there are still tornado watches in effect from eastern Arkansas and in through northern Mississippi as the storm pulls away. So there it is. Winds now at 50 miles an hour. This will likely be a depression by later tonight or tomorrow with a track, mostly rain through the mid-Atlantic. But of course, there's a lot more going on locally as well as in the tropics, and we'll talk more on that coming up in a couple of minutes.
We'll see you shortly. Thank you, Dennis. While Laura wasn't our storm, that isn't stopping organizations from Tampa Bay from helping those impacted. ABC Action News reporter McKenna King tells us what that help looks like during a pandemic.
You know what they say when disaster strikes? Oh! Look for the helpers.
Alleviating human suffering is what we do.
The Red Cross of Central Florida proving that even during a pandemic, their mission hasn't changed.
We touch people's lives, not only figuratively, but actually physically.
But the way they do it has.
People find comfort in a touch to the arm. Sometimes we get hugs. We use eye contact to try and convey how we feel about the situation for them. And we can't do that now.
Michael Hill is one of 7 Red Cross of Central Florida volunteers headed to Louisiana tomorrow to join the 13 already on the ground.
First, initially, they got there to focus on providing a safe refuge as the hurricane came in.
Now they'll work to assess storm damage and work with FEMA to help boost resources.
We've seen the footage of the initial impacts. There's going to be a lot to clean up.
As well as work to get people out of shelters.
Everything takes longer. You know, you got to have the social distancing like we're here. It has that little extra communication, so we make adjustments.
And into more sustainable housing. In Tampa, McKenna King, ABC Action News.
An update now on the boycotts in response to the Jacob Blake shooting in Wisconsin. The NBA says the playoffs will continue, but tonight's games have been postponed. The Milwaukee Bucks were the first team to not take the court in response to the police shooting, and their decision has had a ripple effect on the sports world. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we have the latest on that case and also reaction from our football team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jameson.
A man in Tampa is facing charges for allegedly robbing a pet store clerk with a machete before taking off with their car. Dedrick Malone was arrested yesterday, one day after walking into the pet supermarket on Dale Mabry with a machete and demanding cash from the cashier. He also took his car keys. The officers found him in Bradenton and say he confessed to the robbery and told them where the cashier's car was, which was in St. Pete. It was a big moment today for a man wrongfully accused of murder back in 1983. Now 55-year-old Robert Dubois walked out of the Hardy Correctional Institute a free man.
ABC Action News reporter Heather Lee is joining us now live. And Heather, you spoke with him about 2 hours ago. What was the tone this afternoon?
Well, Lauren and Jameson, he tells me he does not have any anger in his heart or hatred for that matter. He just doesn't have any room for that. He is relieved, however, to be a free man. He now gets to get his life back on track. He tells me the first thing he wanted to do was give his mother a hug, and that wish was granted. Stepping out under the sun, feeling the heat on his face.
I said it's a beautiful day.
An ordinary Thursday for some, but for Robert Dubois, it's the day the world finally listened and set him free.
I was just happy to get home to my family.
He's been sitting in a prison cell for 37 years, accused of raping and killing 19-year-old Barbara Grams and leaving her body behind a dentist office on North Boulevard. He says parole hearings were especially hard.
Lady says, well, tell me something about the case. And I said, listen, I know what you're looking for. You're looking for remorse. I said, I can't tell you I'm remorseful for something I didn't do.
That was on a day in December 2 years ago. That same night, he says a letter from the Innocence Project arrived, agreeing to take on his case.
Robert's case had all of the ingredients for a wrongful conviction.
A jailhouse informant and what appeared to be a bite mark on Graham's face is what ultimately helped a jury seal his fate.
It was based on the testimony on bite mark evidence, which has been wholly discredited, and it also was based on testimony from a jailhouse informant. There was no other evidence linking Robert to this crime.
After years of trying to test the rape kit sample taken in 1983, after investigators thought it had been destroyed, Teresa Hall with the state attorney's office checked the medical examiner's office and found it. Once tested, it definitively broke any link between Dubois and this horrific crime.
I didn't think they were supposed to get rid of the evidence in this case, but they got rid of it in 1990. You know, that's only 5 years.
Destroying evidence is no longer protocol. Dubois says that is hopeful for others who were wrongfully convicted in the future. Now, the good news for the family of that victim in this case, according to the state attorney's office, that DNA has identified a new suspect, although right now, because it's still under investigation, any details on that suspect are being held under lock and key. Heather Lee, ABC Action News.
Heather, thank you. Now to the coronavirus. The state continues to report thousands of new cases every day. Here's a look at the Department of Health's dashboard. There have been nearly 612,000 cases. 3,200 of them were reported today. The positivity rate at 6.3%. 135 new deaths were also reported. And because of the pandemic and the isolation that comes with it, Pasco County is seeing a major spike in overdoses. All new here at 5, Eric Waxler shows us the organization that is now trying to help.
Less than a year ago, Josephine Wolf's opioid addiction almost killed her.
I was on the verge of going into heart failure.
But she says a dose of Narcan, the drug used to reverse effects of an overdose, saved her life.
I'm very blessed to be here today.
Now Josephine is managing the Good Connections thrift store in Newport Richey and getting help from Grace House. Rachel Starston runs the Transitional Living nonprofit and says people with addiction issues are struggling during this COVID-19 crisis.
We have a lot of people relapsing, fear of losing their jobs, having no income, being isolated.
Pasco County is averaging about 140 overdoses a month since the pandemic started in March, almost triple the amount from a year ago. 37 people died in May alone. About half the overdoses are from heroin and fentanyl. That's why Rachel is using a grant to collect thousands of Narcan doses. She plans to hand them out to those who need it the most.
People who are actively using family members of people actively using.
She hopes that those who can survive an overdose during these difficult times will take advantage of a second chance at life, just like Josephine.
You just can't give up. You have to know, like, as long as you're still breathing, there's still hope, there's still a chance.
Eric Waxler, ABC Action News.
This just in tonight, Florida medical marijuana dispensaries will soon be able to sell edible products. That's according to the State Department of Health. There are some rules, though. For example, they have to be either baked goods, gelatins, chocolates, or drink powders. They can't resemble candy or be decorated. Each location will have to get approval from the state for each edible product before it goes on the market. We're just hours away from the final night of the Republican National Convention, and President Trump will officially accept the nomination. Our Isabel Rosales breaks down reaction from last night and who we'll hear from tonight.
Tonight, we will hear from top Republican brass, including Mitch McConnell, Rudy Giuliani, and Ben Carson, to name a few. Of course, President Trump will be the one to cap off the 2020 RNC with a speech at the White House. But first, let's rewind to last night. RNC Night 3 had to address major news stories: the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, the protests in Wisconsin, plus hurricane, now tropical storm Laura. Dr. McManus said Republicans stressed a law and order message on the heels of racial unrest in the nation. The party featured several women speakers taking aim at working class women voters. Dr. McManus said the party did a good job at sharing personal stories of everyday people. And here is what she thinks they need to do tonight.
When you think about it, we have rarely had a convention take place when you have 4 major crises, but the president now has to work all of those issues into his speech and try to explain to people his vision for how to resolve some of these crises, some of which are lingering. And it's a tough job he'll have, but he has to do it if he wants to get reelected.
RNC Night 4 begins at 8:30. The theme will be America, Land of Greatness. President Trump will close out the night from the White House South Lawn, a choice that is controversial. Experts warn the location violates federal ethics laws. Back to you.
A police shooting in Wisconsin prompts a civil rights investigation. Coming up, the new details in this case and the unrest in the aftermath. Plus, we're getting reaction from the Bucs after pro sports continue to postpone games as they demand a change.